Let me just check to make sure. I believe that we are fully live here. And just thank you both very, very much for joining. I just want to confirm that we're all good. Yep, we're on. So just wanted to, so this is a big issue that we've been discussing for quite some time. So missing and murdered Indigenous women. This was, we passed this unanimously off out of the House and to create the missing and murdered Indigenous women task force while I was in the legislature. And so there are a lot of really important topics that need to be discussed through here. So today we are honored to have guests for the Shakopee Live Town Hall, which we still don't have a good name for yet. So we're just sticking with that for the moment. But we have Representative Heather Keeler. She represents Moorhead District 4A, and she's carrying legislation to create a missing murdered Indigenous office. She's a member of the Yankton Sioux tribe in South Dakota. And so Heather, thank you very much for being here. And we also have Secretary Treasurer Rebecca Crooks-Stratton from the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community here with us today, and she has I could read your bio, Rebecca, but it takes a little while, so we're gonna roll with it. So like I said earlier, this is such an important topic that I put a collared shirt on for the Facebook Live tonight. So very it's a big thing, and so I just really appreciate both of you being here to talk through this and talk through it. So let's start with you, Rebecca, to talk about why we need to be concerned about missing and murdered Indigenous women, and put some context to it here in Minnesota.
Yeah, here in Minnesota, and I think the task force did a really good job in their report of covering, all the systemic issues that really lead up to what's going on.
All right, I think we're back on now. Okay, yes, we're back on now. So sorry, everything cut off. I blame my kids playing Minecraft. So we're going to go with that until now they're all off the internet now. So it's just me. And so we'll see if this all works or not. But thanks again for being here. We'll just give a quick recap. Rebecca discussed how important and we have the original, so I can put these together and make one video out of it. So that'll work okay. So we don't have to go through everything again, but thanks, Rebecca. You want to just give a quick, I don't know, however long of a synopsis for, just to make sure everybody's caught up as to why people in Minnesota need to care, and why it's so important that we work on reducing not just missing and murdered women in general, but why it's so important that we focus as well on Indigenous women.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's important because it's such a disproportionate rate. Women, Native American women make up about 1% of the population. And I want to say it's about 8% of all murdered women and girls in Minnesota were American Indian. And that was one of the statistics that came out of the report. So I think if you look at the statistics in the report, they're pretty horrific statistics. So I think this is something that warrants an office, a team of people that can really look to the root causes and address some of those going forward.
Exactly. So Heather, you are working on legislation sorry, I should use your more formal good representative Keeler from Moorhead, Minnesota. You are working on legislation to create an office of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what would that do? And what did the task force believe why that's important?
Mm-hmm. Well, like Rebecca said, the task force and the report outlines a lot of things that us as Indigenous women and Indigenous relatives have known. We just don't have the support, the funding, or even the data to really tell the stories for us to build the programming that we need. And so MMIW/human trafficking have been things I've been working on in my community for a couple years. About 4 years ago, we had a young lady go missing in our own community who was 8.5 months pregnant. It rocked us to the core. I think we always want to believe that those issues are happening in other communities. And when it hits home and it's so personal, I feel like you have two options. You can let that pain really take control of you, or you can turn your pain into passion and purpose. And that's a big reason why I decided to run and be at the table of leadership and state leadership, because I just felt like we needed champions for things like this. And so I'm so grateful for Senator Kunesh and the work that she did, really implementing the task force and being a champion for that. And then the data that we had to now help me and Senator Kunesh push to get this office up and running. The office is really, I mean, it's designed to pull data together because that's one of the pieces that we're missing. But then also do training with our law enforcement. Often there's this divide of who is supposed to handle the cases. Is it, you know, which jurisdiction? Is it tribal jurisdiction? Is it FBI? And we kind of get lost in this intentional mix, I believe. And so the office will help utilize that, but then also help us look at policy and things that we need to fix and update, because this is a systematic issue. There's a lot of little pieces in it. And like Rebecca said, even to our foster care system, you know, if you look at the gaps in a lot of areas, you know, incarceration, foster care, graduation rates, higher education, professionals, life expectancy, you know, as Indigenous people, we don't really have success stories in any of those areas. And so I think that this office will do really amazing work to be a very like foundation to the bigger work that still needs to happen.
And so local here, Rebecca, what kind of impact will having this office and will this work have on Shakopee, Mdewakanton, Sioux community and other communities throughout the state and nation?
You know, I think here in Shakopee, you know, SMSC, we have relatives in tribal communities all over the place. So, you know, I think this is a really important issue across the board because the Indian country is so small and everybody has, you know, a story, an acquaintance, a friend, a relative that has been impacted by these issues. And I think any community, no one wants to see their young women, their, you know, young girls be put in these sort of situations. And I think bringing awareness to particularly Indigenous women also creates a platform to talk about this on a broader level too. Because it's not just Indigenous women, it's happening all over the place.
Right, exactly. And I mean, we've seen with the Line 3 construction that's going on in northern Minnesota, there's been a lot of issues around there with exploitation and young women being trafficked. And it's just a terrible, terrible thing that we all have to work on. And so what kinds of things can everyone do together outside of the legislation that's happening to make sure that people are working on reducing all over this issue that's plaguing a lot of folks? Heather, you want to take that one? Start.
Sure. I mean, I think that, yeah. I mean, it's so to me, we have to like look at the things that basically sexualizes Indigenous women. You know, you look at the way that settlement worked, and we were like property versus people, and the way that people treated us, we were easily taken, we were easily used, and that's not gone away. And when I talk to people about like what are the little things that you can do to help, I think it's removing that stigma when it comes to Indigenous women and relatives. An example is Halloween costumes. You know, we're not costumes, and creating this space where Indigenous women are sexualized over and over in spaces really it affects the way that people think about us. You know, when we walk around in a world that's what people think about us, it's just a different type of a feeling. It's not safe, you know, and people look at generations that we've been taken and nobody looks for us. And there's always this, like, our families look for us and our communities look for us. But when we're only 1% of the entire population, that gets really hard. You know, it's crazy because I had to tell my teenager a couple years ago, if I ever go missing, don't ever let anybody tell you that I just chose to leave one day, because that's the narrative that happens a lot. Or like even when we call law enforcement because we are afraid that somebody's gone missing, you know, there's this runaround of like, well, are you sure they didn't just leave with friends, or did they just make a bad choice, or what's their past you know, history of use or anything like that. And so I think each of us, one, we need to change the narrative that we are human, you know, relatives to all of you, just like everybody else. But also when we go missing and we talk about it, like, believe us, hear us, see us, you know, engage with us, and help us, because this is a prime opportunity for allyship. If 100% of the Indigenous population in America stood on the top of a mountain and screamed something like we have been for murdered and missing Indigenous women, we are still only 1% of this nation. It's easy to sweep us under the rug. It's easy to say that we don't matter, or it's just that little voice over in the corner. So we need help amplifying this epidemic that has been happening to us for generations. We talk about being activists. I feel like everybody is an activist nowadays, but like, being a true activist is stepping out of the things that matter to you and caring about another population. And so we really need strong advocates to stand up and help, you know, support the funding, support the efforts. If there's searches in your communities or in your regions, you know, help that and put pressure on our law enforcement and our FBI to look at our cases and really care about them. This is, you know, we're part of the communities and we need our communities to step up with us.
Very good. Yeah. Secretary Treasurer of the Shakopee, Mdewakanton Sioux community, Rebecca, what do you have to add to that?
You know, I completely agree. I don't have a lot to add. You know, everything Representative Keeler addressed are things that everybody can do. And I think the law enforcement piece is critical in that when they do get calls, they do need to take it seriously. You know, it's not any different than like a child abduction. The window's short. You know, if somebody's missing, the time you have to do something is short, and the more serious people take that, the better chance we have of recovering our missing our missing Indigenous women. So I think that's really critical, and I think these are hard conversations to have, and it's hard to think about all the structural and systemic things that lead to this. And we have to continue to have those conversations and not dance around why this is happening, and kind of own these systems and dismantling them so that we don't keep perpetuating this epidemic.
Right, exactly. And I also think it's important to make sure that everybody knows as well that Luke Hennon, the county sheriff here in Scott County, was also part of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force as well. So he was part of that work that was done. And so there was a report that came out, and it's an extensive report that I'll put in the comment section here. And if anybody has questions, you can add it to the comment section. We'll ask those here real quick. But use the comment section on Facebook. Sorry, the YouTube feed stopped, so I apologize for that. So we're just on Facebook right now. But with that, Heather, your Representative Keeler, your bill will create the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Office. And so this passed through the legislature, I believe, with 0 no votes the entire time that it came through in 2019 when it was going through and getting implemented. It passed off the House floor with no votes. And I just don't want to dwell on this, but I want to make sure that people know that our representative, Eric Mortensen, voted against it. And he's the only no vote, I believe, that the whole thing has had. Did he talk to either of you about this at all before his no vote?
Well, he didn't talk to me. You know, and this is one of the things when I talk about allyship, and one of the things that I am really proud about in the House is a lot of the Indigenous focused bills that we've brought forward have had a lot of really great bipartisan buy-in. You know, this is not a party line issue. Indigenous lives matter. The cultural revitalization matters. And I'm so proud of both sides of the aisle for seeing that, and being able to come together and work together, for our communities. I can say, I guess it doesn't surprise me. I was a little bit disappointed, especially because of the population and the community, of Shakopee and what that, represents, and the statement that makes. I think as leaders who step up to fill a seat, it's our responsibility to care about our constituents and everybody in our communities. And that's including people who don't look like us, who maybe don't have the same views as us all the time, but we should really take that into consideration. And this bill is designed to save lives. That's just the hard, fast truth of it. And so I just continue to, I guess, focus on the support that we do have, and just making sure that we continue to really work close with our allies, and knowing, who our allies are. And I think having a show like this to bring awareness to the bigger issues, it's so much more than just the bill, and the task force shows who our allies are.
Right. Like, I had no idea how big of a problem this was until Representative Kunis brought it up and was talking about it, and it was just heartbreaking. And so, Rebecca, do you have anything you'd like to add to that as well?
No, I think a lot of issues that affect tribal people are bipartisan and do have a lot of support on both sides of the aisle. And it would be nice if there were a little more communication. I would welcome a conversation with anyone, but really to understand why you wouldn't support something as important as this, especially when your constituents are a group of tribal people, a tribal nation in your area. So that's a little disappointing.
Right, exactly. So we haven't had any other questions come up from folks that we haven't answered so far. So I'll just let you guys go for your evening. I really appreciate you both being here to talk about this with us and to share the really important work that's being done around this and what people can do. Do you have anything that you'd like to close with before we let everybody go? So Rebecca, you can start.
I just thank you so much for, providing this space, because I think it's great to raise awareness and talk about the work that is going on across the state. I think the task force is a wonderful first step, and I, applaud Representative Keeler and her efforts to open an office that could really move the needle here in Minnesota on this. And I think there's work going on around the country too. I think of on the federal level, if we had offices both on state and federal levels, we would have, collaboration and a new platform to really address this issue all the way around. So no, thank you for your time tonight. And thank you, Representative Keeler, for all you're doing.
Thank you, Rebecca. Heather.
Yes. Rebecca said it. It's one thing to do it on a state level. It's another thing to do it on a federal level. And I love what Deb Haaland is doing and the conversations that she's starting, because, the city that I represent is Moorhead, which is right up against Fargo, which is a North Dakota community. And so, this issue doesn't stop at our borders. We see a lot of transition, especially when you look at our freeways and, just how fluid people are in our different communities. And so it is one thing to start in our own state, in our own communities, and that's extremely important. But it is another thing to really get this going on a federal level. And so, just stay involved. I tell everybody that this is important to everybody, but I am going to leave kind of with one note and one message, is that these changes that we want, we need people at the table at a state level that genuinely care. Ideally people who look like us. That's why I ran. I didn't see anybody who looked like me growing up or in education settings and professional settings, and definitely not at state levels making decisions for me and my families. And so to anybody who's out there, especially like our next generation and our youth, look at paths of leadership, because representation matters, whether that's in your high schools, whether that's in your colleges or in your work space, the more of us that step up to lead, the more inclusive and diverse our leadership styles will be. And so join us at the table. You know, there's 4 Indigenous women right now, and we would love to have more brothers and sisters join us in these tables and conversations. And so get involved any way you can. Thank you, Brad, for hosting this. I think the conversations that we can continue to have to bring awareness is so important. And May 5th is MMIW Awareness Day. So stay tuned for opportunities to get involved.
Perfect. Thank you. And we'll keep sharing that information and getting it out there. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here. I just really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us. So now we're going to have Shakopee resident Deb Barber. So you guys can go. You're free to leave. You can stay if you want, whatever works. I just appreciate your time and all your work you do. So we're going to bring in Deb Barber, who is Shakopee resident. And while Deb is coming in here, just want to give everybody the statistics of, so although American Indian women and girls make up just 1% of the state's population, from 2010 through 2018, 8% of all murdered women and girls in Minnesota were American Indian. From 27 to 54 American Indian women and girls in Minnesota were missing in any given month from 2012 through 2020. So that's what a large issue this is. And so now to put some more context around that, the issue that we're all dealing with and how it affects families and folks right here in Shakopee and throughout the country, Deb Barber has going to share part of her family story. Deb, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks so much for doing this tonight. It's such a great opportunity to get this issue out in front of new people, so more people can continue to have conversations about it. Brad asked me to come here tonight because he knows this is a story that's really personal to my family. If you look back in your own histories, your cousins were probably your first friends. They're the people that you grew up with, the people that, were there to support you when you needed it. I know recently when I lost my mom due to COVID, my cousins were the first ones there to help me out. And so this is a story about cousins. It's also a story about my husband. So my husband is an enrolled member of the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribe in northwestern Montana. Grew up on the Flathead Reservation. Big network of cousins. And so far of that network of cousins, 2 of them, both young women, have been murdered. One was strangled and burned alive, and the other one was pushed out of a moving car. The one who was burned and strangled, the person who murdered her was released from jail even before the second cousin died. And things like that shouldn't happen, and it shouldn't happen to people, and shouldn't happen to families. I asked my husband if he wanted to do this, and he just said it was going to be way too hard to come on and talk about it, because these are people who matter to him. And the one thing with our stories that differs from a lot of Native women's stories is we at least knew what happened. And we did have at least some element of justice. I would say inadequate justice, but we did have some. But that's not how it usually goes. There was a story in the newspaper on Sunday about the reservation that my husband's from, and centered around some of the actions that they're taking, trying to work on this federal effort that that both Rebecca and Representative Keeler were talking about. And their tribe was brought out of discussions from their tribe for a reason, because it's not unusual to hear about another missing Native woman. And so it's something that we need to realize happens to people. And Indian country is a relatively small group of people. But I think Rebecca said it, we all know someone. Everyone knows someone, and that's not the way it should be. So I'm really happy to see this effort on a state level of really coming up, because I can tell you from the family's perspective, even the lack of resources of who to go to, who to talk to when someone goes missing or is murdered, it gets really complicated because you do have different jurisdictions, whether you're looking at tribal governments and tribal police, or you're looking at sheriff's offices or FBI, and it can get very complicated and confusing as to who is responsible and who's going to help the families get through things and who's going to help get justice for these girls. And so I think it's a really critical step for our state to do this. It's something that we could really be leaders on if we could get out of the way and get it done. I'm hoping to see it get done this session. I think, you know, there's a lot of good voices that are stepping behind it. Unfortunately, our representative we have right now is not one of them, which I find extraordinarily disappointing considering the location of that we have, that he has constituents who are tribal members. And so it's very, very disappointing that he at least didn't reach out to learn more about this before voting no on it. But anyhow, that's my story.
Thank you, Deb. So is it, with what happened, is there a breakdown between jurisdictions, on legal jurisdictions, between what's happening? Like, how does this happen?
It depends, and that's probably, that answer is probably part of the problem. So if something happens on tribal lands, often tribal police are the first ones to respond, and it's whether then do they contact through counties, or does it go through a federal level, or it starts to get a little murky where people are supposed to go. And that's why having advocates locally would be so helpful, especially because when it is somebody who's gone missing, that those things are so time sensitive that the last thing you need is red tape and to not know where to go. So having resources available locally would really benefit families, and hopefully lead in general to more survivors. Right,
exactly. Good. Well, is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation before we go to wrap up for the night?
No, I think I'm good. Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for sharing that, and thank Chip for us all as well. I just really appreciate it. It's important to continue to connect these things to real people's lives, and people that they know and people that they see around here in our community. It's important for that story to be shared.
Very much so. Thanks, Brad.
Perfect. Thanks, Deb. All right, so we are now, we're going to wrap this up. Just wanted to make a couple notes for everybody. I really appreciate everybody's time being here tonight. This is a really tough subject, and it's a really difficult thing for folks to be part of and folks to talk about. So I just really appreciate Deb and Rebecca Crooks-Stratton and Heather Keeler for their time in joining us to share what's going on and how we can be parts of the solution. And so I think that's a really important piece that we talk about. So a couple different things. One is all the PCRs went in the mail today. So that is really good for folks. So thank you very much, everybody, especially our awesome treasurer, Regina Smith, for getting all that done and moving. So PCRs are in the mail. So in those envelopes that you get for everybody who donated, if you donated $10 or more, we send you a PCR so that you can send that back in and get the refund from the state for your political contribution refund. And so that is there. In there, you'll find an envelope that you can send the form in. You have a receipt. And you have instructions and what is called a PCR form. And so that you just fill that out and put your bank information on there so that the state can direct deposit money into your checking account. So it's up to $50 per person per year, $100 per couple per year for what you can get refunded. And what this does, it helps keep big money out of campaigns. So it helps incentivize and push local people to invest in local campaigns and to be part of those solutions so that we can help prop up good campaigns in all across the state of Minnesota. So that's a really good thing. Other thing I want to tell everybody is if you want to be part of our volunteer corps for the campaign. So if you want to be part of not just things like door knocking and phone calling, but if you want to, make food, if you want to help by writing postcards, if you want to be a precinct captain for your area, if you live in an apartment building and if you want to help organize your apartment building and make sure everybody gets out to vote, things like that. We're going to have a volunteer organizing event on April 21st. That's a Wednesday. It's at 8 p.m. So that will be on Zoom. We'll be sending out that link to everybody who signs up to be a volunteer. So if you are go to tabkey4mn.com/volunteer and you'll be able to get that link. And so we'll have get those pieces up and rolling and going from there. So those are the couple things. Watch your mail for your political contribution refund. Get that sent in right away so you can get your money back. And then secondly, put 8 p.m. on the 21st on your calendar, and we'll go from there. So we'll be back again for another one of these. Maybe we'll have a name by then for this little live town hall thing that we're doing. I just appreciate everybody's time. We had just thousands and thousands and thousands of views on the last one. So it's really awesome to have people engaging and asking questions and being part of it. Before we go, can't leave COVID undiscussed. COVID is bad in Shakopee right now, folks. Please stay safe. Please do what you can. I'm super happy I'm getting my shot, get a Johnson & Johnson shot on Thursday. So get vaccinated, stay safe, stay social distance, wear your mask, don't get in big groups, those kinds of things. That's where a lot of this is, the transfer is happening as large groups, a lot of the year end things. So I hope at Easter, we didn't have a lot of things happening, but it's so per capita, Scott County is the highest of all counties over 100,000 for COVID per capita as well. We are number 6 in the state. And so that includes all the little small counties that only have a couple thousand people in them, where if 4 people at a barbecue get COVID, that spikes their numbers. Ours are not the same. Ours are serious amounts of COVID being spread in Shakopee. So this is all the UK variant that is more dangerous for younger folks, more dangerous for spreading. So be safe until we can all get vaccinated. So keep looking for vaccines, get that done. And we'll go from there. So thank you so much, everybody, for being awesome. Thanks for being here. And I'll see you all again soon.